Sarah Martinez sat at her small desk in the corner of the office. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she typed another report for her boss. The clock on the wall showed 8:30 p.m. Most people had gone home hours ago, but Sarah was still working. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked around the empty office. The lights were dim, and only the sound of her typing filled the quiet space. Sarah had been working at Blackstone Industries for 2 years now. It was not her dream job, but it paid the bills. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her younger brother, Carlos. "Mom had another bad day. The doctor wants to see her again next week. Can you help with the hospital bill?" Sarah felt her heart sink. Her mother had been sick for 3 years now. The medical bills kept getting bigger, and Sarah was the only one in the family with a steady job. Carlos was still in college, working part-time at a coffee shop. He tried his best to help, but it was never enough. She quickly typed back, "Of course. I'll send money tomorrow morning." Sarah looked at her bank account on her phone. After paying for her mother's medicine and Carlos's school books, she had just enough left for her own rent and food. There was nothing extra. There never was. She thought back to her life 5 years ago. Everything had been so different then. Sarah had just finished her music degree at the New York Music School. She was one of the best piano players in her class. Her teachers said she had real talent. They told her she could have a bright future as a professional pianist. Sarah remembered the excitement she felt when she got accepted to study with Professor Williams, one of the most famous piano teachers in the country. She had big dreams then. She wanted to play in concert halls around the world. She imagined herself wearing beautiful dresses, playing for thousands of people who would clap and cheer. But life had other plans for Sarah. Just 2 months before she was supposed to start her advanced music program, her father had a heart attack. He died suddenly, leaving the family with huge medical debts and no income. Someone had to take care of the family. That someone was Sarah. She had to give up her music dreams and find a regular job with steady pay and good health insurance. It broke her heart, but she had no choice. Family came first. Now, 3 years later, Sarah worked as an administrative assistant at Blackstone Industries. The company made computer software and was very successful. The owner, Marcus Blackstone, was one of the richest men in the city. He was only 45 years old but already had millions of dollars. Sarah had seen Marcus around the office many times, but they rarely spoke. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He always wore expensive suits and never smiled at the workers. Everyone in the office was afraid of him. Marcus had a bad reputation among the employees. People said he liked to make fun of workers in front of others. He would call people into meetings just to embarrass them. Some workers had quit because of the way he treated them. Sarah tried to stay out of Marcus's way. She did her work quietly and went home. She didn't want any trouble. She needed this job too much to risk making the boss angry. Her desk was in the main office area with about 20 other workers. Most of them were nice people, but everyone was stressed about keeping their jobs. Marcus had fired 3 people last month for small mistakes. No one felt safe. Sarah's job was to help manage schedules, answer phones, and type reports. It was boring work, but she was good at it. She was always careful to do everything perfectly. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. Sometimes during her lunch break, Sarah would walk past the music store downtown. She would look at the pianos in the window and remember how it felt to play. Her fingers would move slightly, as if they were still playing invisible keys, but she always walked away quickly. Those dreams belonged to her old life. At home in her small apartment, Sarah had an old keyboard that she kept in the closet. She had bought it years ago, hoping she might still practice sometimes, but every time she looked at it, she felt too sad. It reminded her of everything she had lost. Her mother often asked her about music. "Do you still play, Mia?" she would say in her weak voice from the hospital bed. "You were so good. Maybe you could play for the other patients here. It would make them happy." Sarah would always smile and change the subject. She couldn't explain to her sick mother that music hurt too much now. It was easier to pretend she had simply moved on to other things. The office Christmas party was coming up in a few weeks. Every year, Marcus threw a big event at the fancy hotel downtown. All the important people in the city came to the party. Business leaders, politicians, and rich families all attended. It was supposed to show how successful the company was. For the workers, the Christmas party was not fun. Marcus always found ways to make some employees uncomfortable during the event. Last year, He had made the accounting manager give a speech about his divorce in front of everyone. The year before, he forced the new intern to serve drinks to all the guests like a waiter. Sarah hoped she could just blend in at this year's party. She planned to wear her only nice dress, stay in the back of the room, and leave as early as possible. She had learned that the best way to survive at Blackstone Industries was to be invisible. As she finally finished her work and prepared to go home, Sarah looked at the family photo on her desk. It showed her, Carlos, and their mother from 2 years ago, before the sickness got really bad. They were all smiling and looked happy. Sarah touched the photo gently. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to the image of her family. "All of this is for you." She packed up her things and headed for the door. Tomorrow would be another long day at the office, but she would face it like she faced every day, with quiet strength and the hope that somehow things would get better for her family. Sarah didn't know that her life was about to change in ways she never expected. She had no idea that Marcus Blackstone was already making plans that would involve her, plans that would bring her greatest fear and eventually her greatest triumph. Monday morning came too quickly for Sarah. She arrived at the office at 8 a.m. sharp, like always. She hung her coat in the small closet and sat down at her desk. The office was buzzing with nervous energy. Word had spread that Marcus Blackstone wanted to have a big meeting with everyone at 10 a.m. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Company meetings were never good news. Usually they meant someone was getting fired or that there would be more work for everyone. At exactly 10 a.m., all the employees gathered in the main conference room. Sarah found a seat in the back corner, trying to make herself as small as possible. She counted 23 people in the room, all looking worried and uncomfortable. Marcus walked into the room wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 months. His shoes clicked loudly on the floor as he moved to the front of the room. He didn't smile or greet anyone. He just stared at the group with his cold blue eyes. "I have an announcement about this year's Christmas gala," Marcus said in his sharp voice. "This year will be different. This year will be special." Sarah noticed that several people shifted nervously in their seats. When Marcus said something would be special, it usually meant trouble for the workers. "I've decided that our gala needs more entertainment," Marcus continued. "Not the boring music we usually hire.
I want real entertainment."
I want to show our guests the hidden talents of our employees." Sarah felt confused. What did he mean by hidden talents? Marcus began walking around the room slowly, looking at each person as he spoke. "I'm sure many of you have interesting skills that you don't use at work. Maybe you sing or dance or play instruments. Well, now you'll have a chance to share those talents with our important guests." The room was completely quiet. Everyone was afraid to speak or even move. "Let me be clear," Marcus said with a thin smile. "This is not a request. This is a requirement. Every employee will participate in some way. Some of you will perform. Others will help organize. But everyone will be involved." Sarah's heart started beating faster. She didn't like where this was going. Marcus stopped walking and stood near Sarah's corner of the room. "Now, I know some of you might be shy about performing. But don't worry. I'll help you decide what you should do." He pulled out a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "I've been doing some research about my employees. It's amazing what you can learn about people if you pay attention." Sarah felt sick. She had a terrible feeling about what was coming next. "For example," Marcus said, looking directly at Sarah, "I recently discovered that we have a real musician working right here in our office, someone with a fancy music degree from a very expensive school." All eyes in the room turned to Sarah. She felt her face turn red and hot. She wanted to disappear into her chair. "Sarah Martinez," Marcus said loudly, "please stand up." Sarah's legs felt like they were made of water, but she slowly stood up. The room was spinning slightly and she had to hold on to her chair to stay steady. "Sarah has been hiding her musical talents from us," Marcus said with fake enthusiasm. "She studied piano at the New York Music School. Very impressive. Very expensive." Sarah heard someone behind her whisper. "I didn't know Sarah played piano." She wanted to explain that she didn't play anymore, that it was all in the past, but her voice wouldn't work. "So naturally," Marcus continued, "Sarah will be our featured performer at the Christmas gala. She'll play piano for all our distinguished guests." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt dizzy and had to sit back down quickly. I don't..." She tried to speak, but Marcus cut her off. "I'm sure you're excited about this opportunity, Sarah. It's not every day that someone gets to perform in front of the city's most important people. The mayor will be there, several millionaires, business leaders, news reporters. Sarah's mind was racing. She couldn't perform in front of all those people. She hadn't played piano seriously in 3 years. Her skills were rusty, her confidence was gone. This would be a disaster, but worse than that, she knew exactly why Marcus was doing this. He had somehow found out about her past, and now he wanted to embarrass her in front of everyone. He probably expected her to fail miserably, giving him and his rich friends something to laugh about. "The gala is in 2 weeks, Marcus said, still looking at Sarah. "That should be plenty of time for you to prepare. I'm sure it's like riding a bicycle. Once you learn piano, you never forget, right?" Sarah tried to speak again. "Mr. Blackstone, I haven't played in a long time. Maybe someone else could—" "Nonsense," Marcus said sharply. "False modesty doesn't suit you, Sarah. You have a degree in music. You must be good at it, or you wouldn't have wasted so much money on school." Some people in the room laughed nervously. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame. "Besides," Marcus added with a cruel smile, "I've already told several important guests about our talented pianist. They're very excited to hear you play. I can't disappoint them now, can I?" Sarah realized she was trapped. If she refused, Marcus would probably fire her. If she agreed and failed, she would be humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Either way, she lost. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Excellent." Marcus clapped his hands once loudly. "The gala is at the Grand Palace Hotel on December 20th. The performance will be at 8 p.m. right after dinner. You'll have the whole ballroom's attention." Sarah felt like she might throw up. Marcus turned to address the rest of the room. "Now the rest of you will help make this gala perfect. I want decorations, food service, and everything else to be flawless. This will be the most talked about event of the year." He started assigning jobs to other employees. Sarah stopped listening. Her mind was stuck on one terrible thought. She would have to play piano in front of hundreds of strangers in just 2 weeks. After the meeting ended, Sarah stumbled back to her desk. Her hands were shaking as she tried to work on her computer. The words on the screen looked blurry and meaningless. Her coworker Janet came over to her desk. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "That was horrible. Is there anything I can do to help?" Sarah looked up at Janet's kind face and almost started crying. "I don't know what I'm going to do, Janet. I can't play piano anymore." "Not like that. Not in front of all those people. Maybe you could talk to him privately," Janet suggested. "Explain that you're not ready." Sarah shook her head. "You know Marcus. He doesn't change his mind. And if I refuse, he'll fire me. I can't lose this job. My family needs the money and insurance." Janet squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently. "Then you'll have to find a way to do it. Maybe it won't be as bad as you think." But Sarah knew it would be worse than Janet could imagine. Marcus wasn't giving her this opportunity to help her career. He was setting her up to fail in the most public and humiliating way possible. As the day went on, word spread through the office about Sarah's upcoming performance. Some people congratulated her. Others looked at her with pity. A few seemed excited to see what would happen. By the end of the day, Sarah felt like everyone was staring at her. She had become the center of attention in the worst possible way. Walking home that evening, Sarah tried to think of a way out of this situation. But every option she considered led to the same conclusion. She was going to have to face her biggest fear and hope she could survive it. That night, Sarah sat on her small couch staring at the closet door. Behind that door was her old keyboard, covered in dust and forgotten for 3 years. She knew she had to take it out, but her hands wouldn't move. Finally, she forced herself to stand up and open the closet. There it was, pushed behind old winter coats and boxes. The keyboard looked smaller than she remembered. When she pulled it out, dust fell everywhere, making her sneeze. Sarah plugged it in and turned it on. The familiar sound of the startup made her heart race. She sat down and put her fingers on the keys. They felt cold and strange, like touching something from another life. She tried to play a simple scale. Her fingers stumbled over notes that used to be automatic. The sound was ugly and uneven. Sarah pulled her hands away quickly as if the keys had burned her. "I can't do this," she said out loud to her empty apartment. "I'm not a pianist anymore." But then she thought about her mother in the hospital and Carlos struggling with his college bills. She thought about Marcus Blackstone's cruel smile and the hundreds of people who would be watching her fail. She had to at least try. The next morning at work, Sarah could barely concentrate on her regular tasks. Every few minutes, she would look at the clock and count how many days she had left. 13 days. The number felt impossible. During her lunch break, Sarah did something she had never done before. She snuck into the unused conference room on the third floor. She had noticed an old piano there during a company tour last year. It was probably out of tune, but it was better than her small keyboard at home. The room was dark and dusty. In the corner sat a black upright piano that looked like it hadn't been played in years. Sarah lifted the cover over the keys and pressed middle C. The sound was hollow and slightly flat, but it was a real piano. She looked around to make sure no one was coming, then sat down on the wobbly bench. Her hands shook as she placed them on the keys. She tried to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, the first song every piano student learns. Even this simple melody sounded terrible. Her fingers hit wrong notes and the timing was all mixed up. Sarah felt tears start to form in her eyes. How could she perform for hundreds of people when she couldn't even play a children's song? But she didn't give up. For the next 30 minutes, she practiced basic scales and simple songs. Her fingers were stiff and clumsy, but slowly tiny bits of memory started coming back. When she returned to her desk, Janet noticed her red eyes. "Are you okay, Sarah?" "I've been practicing," Sarah whispered. "It's not going well." Over the next few days, Sarah developed a routine. Every lunch break, she would sneak up to the third floor and practice on the old piano. She started bringing her own lunch so she could use the full hour for music. The first few sessions were disasters. Sarah had forgotten so much. Her technique was sloppy, her timing was off, and her hands cramped up quickly. But gradually, small improvements began to show. She remembered how to position her fingers correctly. She recalled breathing techniques her old teacher had shown her. Slowly, the basic skills started coming back. At home, she practiced on her keyboard every night after dinner. Her neighbors probably wondered about the strange sounds coming from her apartment. Sometimes she played the same passage 50 times, trying to get it right. Sarah decided she needed to choose a piece to perform. Something not too difficult, but impressive enough that she wouldn't embarrass herself completely. She remembered a piece by Chopin that she used to love, Minute Waltz. It was beautiful, but not too technically challenging. She found the sheet music online and printed it out at work. The notes looked familiar, but foreign at the same time, like reading a language she used to speak fluently but had forgotten. The first time she tried to play Minute Waltz, it was a complete mess. Her left hand couldn't keep up with her right hand. The fast section sounded like someone was hitting random keys. Sarah wanted to quit and go hide under her covers, but something strange happened during her 5th day of practice. For just a few measures, everything clicked. Her hands moved together smoothly, and the melody flowed like it was supposed to. It lasted only about 10 seconds, but in those 10 seconds, Sarah remembered what it felt like to really play piano. That tiny moment of success gave her hope. If she could play 10 seconds correctly, maybe she could eventually play the whole piece. Sarah started practicing more intensely. She would arrive at work 30 minutes early to get extra time on the third-floor piano. During her breaks, she would watch piano technique videos on her phone. At night, she practiced until her fingers were too tired to continue. Her coworkers began to notice her dedication. "I hear piano music coming from upstairs sometimes," said Bob from accounting. "Is that you, Sarah?" Sarah blushed. "I'm just trying to get ready for the gala." "Well, it sounds good from down here," Bob said kindly. But Sarah knew Bob was just being nice. She could hear how she sounded, and it wasn't good enough. Not nearly good enough for the kind of performance Marcus expected. 1 week before the gala, Sarah had a breakthrough. She managed to play the entire Minute Waltz from beginning to end without stopping. It wasn't perfect. There were still many mistakes. But she finished it. She sat on the piano bench feeling proud and terrified at the same time. She could play a complete piece now. But would it be good enough? What if she forgot the notes during the performance? What if her hands froze up in front of all those people? That evening, Sarah called her mother at the hospital. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" "Better, Mika. The new medicine is helping. Carlos tells me you're going to play piano at your company party. I'm so happy. I knew you would return to music someday." Sarah didn't have the heart to explain that this wasn't her choice, that she was being forced to perform. "It's just one song, Mom, nothing big." "Music is never nothing big, Sarah. When you play, you share your soul with the world. I remember when you were little, you would play for me when I was sad. Your music always made everything better." After hanging up, Sarah looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her mother still believed in her musical abilities. Maybe, just maybe, there was still some of that talent left inside her. She spent the weekend practicing for hours each day. Her fingertips were sore and her back ached from sitting at the piano for so long. But gradually, minute waltz began to sound like real music instead of noise. On Monday, with just 5 days left until the gala, Sarah made a decision. She would learn one more piece, something slower and more emotional. If she was going to fail, she might as well fail playing music that meant something to her. She chose Clair de Lune by Debussy. It was a piece she had loved in college, full of beautiful flowing melodies. It was also more forgiving than Chopin. If she made small mistakes, they wouldn't be as obvious. Learning the second piece was harder because she had less time, but Sarah was determined. She practiced during every free moment, sometimes even humming the melodies while she worked at her desk. 3 days before the gala, something remarkable happened. Sarah played both pieces back-to-back without any major mistakes. They weren't perfect performances, but they were musical. They sounded like someone who knew how to play piano. For the first time in 2 weeks, Sarah allowed herself to feel a tiny bit of hope. Maybe she wouldn't humiliate herself after all. Maybe she could get through this performance without complete disaster. But that hope was mixed with terror. In just 3 days, she would have to sit at a piano in front of hundreds of strangers and play music she had relearned in just 2 weeks. Her career, her job, and her family's financial security all depended on those few minutes at the piano. Sarah looked at her hands that night before going to bed. They were the same hands that had once played beautiful music every day. Tomorrow, she would find out if those hands could still remember how to make magic. The last 3 days before the gala were the worst of Sarah's life. Marcus seemed to take special pleasure in reminding everyone about her upcoming performance. He would walk past her desk and make loud comments for everyone to hear. "How's our star pianist doing today?" he would say with a fake smile. "Getting ready for your big debut?" Sarah would try to smile and nod, but inside she felt sick. Marcus's tone made it clear that he was looking forward to watching her fail. On Wednesday, 2 days before the gala, Marcus called Sarah into his private office. She had never been in there before. The room was huge with expensive furniture and artwork on the walls. Behind his desk was a window that looked out over the entire city. "Sit down, Sarah," Marcus said, pointing to a chair across from his massive desk. Sarah sat down and tried to keep her hands from shaking. "I wanted to discuss your performance," Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair. "I've been thinking about the music you should play." Sarah's heart sank. She had been practicing Minute Waltz and Clair de Lune for 2 weeks. Those were the only pieces she felt ready to perform. "I think you should play something more challenging," Marcus continued. "Something that really shows off your expensive education. Maybe Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2? That's a real crowd pleaser." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 was one of the most difficult pieces in classical music. It required an orchestra and took about 35 minutes to perform. Even when she was at her best in college, Sarah had never attempted anything that advanced. I don't think I can play that piece, Mr. Blackstone," Sarah said quietly. "I've been preparing something simpler. Something more appropriate for a dinner event." Marcus's eyes turned cold. "Simpler? Sarah, we're not talking about playing Happy Birthday at a child's party. This is the social event of the year. Our guests expect quality entertainment." "Yes, sir, I understand. But I haven't played piano professionally in 3 years. I need more time to prepare something that difficult." Marcus leaned forward and stared at her. 3 years? That's interesting. So you're telling me that you spent thousands of dollars on a music degree, and then you just stopped? Sarah felt her cheeks burn. "I had family responsibilities. I needed a steady job." "Ah, yes, family responsibilities." Marcus said the words like they tasted bad. "Well, Sarah, now you have work responsibilities too. And I'm telling you that our guests expect to hear real classical music, not beginner pieces." Sarah knew she was trapped. If she refused, Marcus would probably fire her on the spot. But if she agreed to play Rachmaninoff, she would fail catastrophically in front of hundreds of people. Could I have a few more weeks to prepare?" she asked desperately. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "The invitations have already been sent out. The event is scheduled. The guests are expecting to be entertained on Friday night. You'll just have to do your best." He stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I'm sure it will be fine, Sarah. After all, you went to such a prestigious music school. They must have taught you something useful. Sarah walked back to her desk feeling completely defeated. She couldn't learn Rachmaninoff in 2 days. It was impossible. But she also couldn't refuse without losing her job. That afternoon, Marcus made an announcement to the entire office. I have exciting news about Friday's gala. Our very own Sarah Martinez will be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. For those of you who aren't familiar with classical music, this is considered one of the most challenging and beautiful piano pieces ever written. Sarah heard someone whistle in amazement. Someone else said, "Wow, Sarah, I had no idea you were so talented." Sarah wanted to disappear. She tried to focus on her work, but the words on her computer screen looked blurry. She felt like everyone in the office was staring at her. Later that day, Janet came over to her desk. "Sarah, is it true you're playing Rachmaninoff?" "That's incredible." "I don't know if I can do it, Janet," Sarah whispered. "It's too difficult. I'm not ready for something like that." Janet looked confused. "But you studied music in college, right? Surely you learned pieces like that." Sarah shook her head. "I studied it, but I never performed it. It's like asking someone who learned French in school to give a speech at the United Nations. There's a huge difference between learning something and being able to perform it professionally." That evening, Sarah went home and tried to find sheet music for Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 online. When she looked at the first page, her heart sank even further. The music was incredibly complex, with notes flying across the page in patterns that made her dizzy. She tried to play just the opening measures on her keyboard. It was hopeless. Her fingers couldn't move fast enough, and she couldn't reach all the notes that were supposed to be played at the same time. Sarah sat on her couch and cried. She was going to humiliate herself in front of the most important people in the city. Worse than that, Marcus would probably fire her after her failure, leaving her family without income or health insurance. The next day at work was even worse. Marcus had apparently told several important clients about Sarah's upcoming performance. Throughout the day, different people called the office asking about the pianist who would be performing Rachmaninoff. Marcus made sure Sarah could hear every conversation. "Yes, she's very talented," he would say loudly. "Trained at the New York Music School. We're all very excited to hear her play." By lunchtime, Sarah felt like she was going to have a panic attack. She went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, she saw a woman who looked terrified and defeated. When she returned to her desk, there was a newspaper article printed out and placed on her keyboard. The headline read, "Local Company to Feature, Classical Music at Annual Gala." The article mentioned Sarah by name and described her as a professionally trained pianist who will perform one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. Sarah looked around and saw Marcus, watching her from across the room. He smiled and gave her a thumbs up, but his eyes were cold and mean. That afternoon, the company newsletter was published. On the front page was a big article about the upcoming gala. There was even a photo of Sarah from the company directory with a caption that read, "Sarah Martinez, Blackstone Industries' hidden musical talent." The article described her background in glowing terms, calling her a graduate of the prestigious New York Music School and promising that her performance would be the highlight of the evening. Sarah felt sick reading it. The newsletter made her sound like a professional concert pianist, when in reality she was a terrified office worker who hadn't played seriously in 3 years. Her coworker Tom stopped by her desk. "Sarah, I had no idea you were so accomplished. My wife loves classical music. She's really excited to hear you play tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night," Sarah repeated. The words felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. When she got home that evening, Sarah called her brother Carlos. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tomorrow night I have to perform at my company's Christmas party." "That's great, Sarah. You're finally going back to music. Mom will be so happy." "Carlos, I don't think you understand. I have to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in front of hundreds of people. I can't do it. I'm going to fail, and then I'll probably lose my job." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "Sarah," Carlos finally said, "you're scaring me. Can't you just tell your boss that you need more time to prepare?" "He won't listen. He wants me to fail, Carlos. I think he's setting me up on purpose, and that's horrible." "Can you call in sick?" Sarah had thought about that, but she knew it wouldn't work. He'll know I'm lying, and then he'll definitely fire me. That night, Sarah sat at her keyboard trying to learn as much of Rachmaninoff as possible. She managed to play about 30 seconds of the piece before her fingers gave up completely. She looked at the clock. In exactly 20 hours, she would be sitting at a piano in front of the most important people in the city, trying to play music that was far beyond her current abilities. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what would happen when she failed. She pictured herself sitting at the piano, unable to play the notes. She imagined the silence in the ballroom as people realized something was wrong. She saw Marcus's satisfied smile as her humiliation became complete. But then she thought about her mother in the hospital and Carlos struggling to pay for school. Even if she failed spectacularly tomorrow night, she had to try. Her family was depending on her. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for the worst night of her life. Friday evening arrived like a storm that Sarah had been watching approach for weeks. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to make her hand stop shaking long enough to put on lipstick. She was wearing her only nice dress, a simple black one she had bought 2 years ago for a cousin's wedding. The dress felt too tight now. Everything felt wrong. Her stomach was twisted in knots and she could barely eat the piece of toast she had tried to have for dinner. She kept looking at the clock, watching the minutes tick by until her doom. At 6 p.m., she took a taxi to the Grand Palace Hotel. She couldn't afford the taxi fare, but she was too nervous to take the bus. Her hands were shaking so badly that she was afraid she might drop her purse or trip on the steps. The Grand Palace Hotel was the fanciest building Sarah had ever entered. The lobby had marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and gold decorations everywhere. Men in expensive suits and women in beautiful gowns walked through the space like they belonged there. Sarah felt completely out of place. Her simple black dress looked cheap compared to the designer gowns around her. She tried to walk confidently, but her legs felt weak and unsteady. The ballroom was on the second floor. Sarah took the elevator up, and when the doors opened, she gasped. The room was enormous with high ceilings and massive windows. Round tables were set up throughout the space, each one covered with white tablecloths and fancy silverware. At the front of the room was a small stage with a beautiful black grand piano. The piano looked perfect and expensive, nothing like the old upright she had been practicing on at work. Sarah stared at it and felt her heart race even faster. Sarah. There you are. Marcus appeared beside her, wearing a black tuxedo that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. Come with me. I want you to meet some of our special guests. Before Sarah could protest, Marcus grabbed her arm and led her toward a group of well-dressed people near the bar. Sarah recognized some faces from newspaper photos: the mayor, several business leaders, and a famous local news anchor. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah Martinez, Marcus announced loudly. She's our featured entertainment tonight. Sarah is a classically trained pianist who studied at the New York Music School. The group turned to look at Sarah with interest. She tried to smile, but her face felt frozen. How wonderful, said an elderly woman wearing diamonds. What will you be playing for us tonight, dear? Before Sarah could answer, Marcus jumped in. She'll be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It's one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. A man in an expensive suit raised his eyebrows. Impressive. That's not an easy piece. You must be very talented, Sarah finally found her voice. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'm sure we will, said the news anchor. It's not often we get to hear live classical music of that caliber. My photographer will make sure to get some good shots of your performance. Sarah felt dizzy. A photographer? She hadn't realized her failure would be captured on camera for everyone to see. Marcus smiled his cold smile. Yes, this will definitely be a night to remember. He led Sarah away from the group and toward their table. See how excited everyone is? He said quietly. Don't disappoint them, Sarah. Dinner was served, but Sarah couldn't eat anything. The food looked delicious, some kind of fancy chicken with vegetables she couldn't identify. But every bite felt like cardboard in her mouth. She kept looking at the piano on the stage, counting down the minutes until her public humiliation. Around her, people were laughing and talking about business deals and vacation plans. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy. Sarah felt like she was watching everything through glass separate from the joy around her. At 7:45 p.m., Marcus stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The room gradually became quiet as people turned their attention to him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at Blackstone Industries' annual Christmas Gala. Before we continue with dessert, we have a special treat for you tonight. Sarah's hands began to shake uncontrollably under the table. As many of you know, I believe in discovering and showcasing the hidden talents of our employees. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from one such talented individual. Sarah felt hundreds of eyes turning toward her. She tried to take a deep breath, but her chest felt tight. Sarah Martinez has been working with us for 2 years as an administrative assistant. But what many people don't know is that Sarah is a graduate of the prestigious New York Music School, with advanced training in classical piano performance. People at nearby tables turned to look at Sarah and smile. Some clapped politely. Sarah felt like she might throw up. Tonight, Sarah will perform one of the most challenging and beautiful pieces in the piano repertoire, Rachmaninoff's Piano, Concerto No. 2. This is a piece that requires tremendous skill and years of practice to master. Sarah wanted to stand up and run out of the room, but her legs wouldn't move. So please join me in welcoming our very own Sarah Martinez to the stage. The entire ballroom erupted in applause. People were clapping and smiling, looking at Sarah with anticipation and excitement. Someone at her table patted her shoulder encouragingly. Sarah somehow managed to stand up. Her legs felt like they were made of water, but she forced them to carry her toward the stage. Each step felt like walking through mud. The applause seemed to go on forever, echoing in her ears like thunder. She climbed the 3 steps to the small stage. The piano looked even bigger up close, black and shiny under the bright lights. The bench was the perfect height, and the keys gleamed like white and black teeth waiting to bite her. Sarah sat down on the bench and looked out at the audience. There were at least 300 people in the ballroom, all watching her with expectant faces. She could see Marcus in the front row, his cold smile never wavering. She placed her hands on the keys and tried to remember the opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember how the piece started. She couldn't remember anything. The room was completely silent. People were waiting for her to begin. Seconds ticked by, feeling like hours. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She looked down at her hands on the keys. These were the same hands that had once played beautiful music every day. These were the hands that had comforted her as a child when she played simple melodies on her family's old piano. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she remembered her mother's words from their phone call. When you play, you share your soul with the world. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to find that soul, that part of herself that had once loved music more than anything else in the world. For just a moment, she stopped thinking about Marcus and the audience and her fear of failure. When she opened her eyes, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't play Rachmaninoff, that was impossible. But maybe, just maybe, she could play something else. Something real. Something that came from her heart instead of her fear. Sarah took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment of truth had finally arrived. Sarah sat at the piano bench with her eyes closed, feeling the weight of 300 people watching her. The silence in the ballroom was complete. She could hear someone cough nervously in the back of the room. She could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning system, but mostly, she could hear the thundering of her own heartbeat. Her hands were positioned on the keys, but they felt frozen there. She had practiced Rachmaninoff for days, but now she couldn't remember even the first note. The complex piece that Marcus had demanded seemed impossible, like trying to climb a mountain made of ice. But then, something shifted inside Sarah's mind. A memory floated up from years ago. She was 8 years old, sitting at her family's old piano in their small apartment. Her grandmother was in the hospital, and Sarah's mother was crying quietly in the kitchen. Little Sarah had climbed onto the piano bench and started playing a simple melody, something she had made up herself. The memory was so clear she could almost smell her grandmother's perfume and hear her mother's tears stop as the gentle music filled the apartment. Without planning it, Sarah's fingers began to move. But instead of attempting Rachmaninoff, she started playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a piece she had learned in her second year of college. It was challenging but not impossible, beautiful but not showing off. The first notes rang out hesitant and soft. Sarah's fingers were stiff from nerves and the melody wobbled slightly. In the audience, she heard someone whisper, "That's not Rachmaninoff." Sarah almost stopped. She almost pulled her hands away from the keys and ran off the stage. But then she remembered why she was here. Not for Marcus, not for the fancy people in expensive clothes, but for her family. For her sick mother and her struggling brother. For the little girl she used to be who found comfort in music when the world felt too hard. She took a deeper breath and kept playing. The melody grew stronger. Her fingers remembered the patterns they had practiced thousands of times years ago. Muscle memory began to take over where conscious thought had failed. The Chopin piece was like a story told in music. It started soft and gentle, like someone whispering a secret. Then it grew more passionate, with running notes that sparkled like water flowing over stones. Sarah's left hand found its rhythm, providing a steady heartbeat under the dancing melody of her right hand. Something magical began to happen. The fear that had been crushing Sarah's chest started to lift. As she played, she stopped thinking about the audience and Marcus and her terror of failure. She started thinking only about the music, about the story the notes were telling. The piano at the Grand Palace Hotel was nothing like the old upright she had been practicing on. This instrument was perfectly tuned and incredibly responsive. When Sarah played softly, the notes sang like gentle whispers. When she played with force, the sound filled the entire ballroom with rich, powerful tones. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah remembered why she had fallen in love with music. It wasn't about showing off or impressing people. It was about expressing feelings that were too deep for words. It was about creating something beautiful in a world that often felt ugly and hard. As the Chopin piece moved into its middle section, Sarah's confidence grew. Her fingers were finding their old flexibility. Her timing became more precise. The music flowed from the piano like it was coming from somewhere deep inside the instrument's soul. She glanced up at the audience for just a moment. The room was completely still. People had stopped eating, stopped drinking, stopped whispering to each other. They were all listening, really listening to what she was creating. But more importantly, Sarah saw that their faces had changed. When she had first sat down, people had looked at her with polite expectation, the way you look at someone you're not sure about. Now they looked fascinated. Some people had their eyes closed, lost in the music. Others were leaning forward in their chairs as if they didn't want to miss a single note. Even Marcus looked different. His cold, cruel smile had disappeared. He was staring at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. As if something was happening that he hadn't planned for. Sarah moved into the most challenging section of the ballade. This was the part where the melody became a conversation between her left and right hands, where the notes danced together in complex patterns that required years of practice to master. But something incredible was happening to Sarah's hands. They were remembering not just the notes, but the feeling of playing them. They were remembering the joy of making music, the satisfaction of executing a difficult passage perfectly, the thrill of bringing a beautiful piece to life. Years of suppressed musical knowledge came flooding back. Her fingers found strength and speed she didn't know they still possessed. Her ears heard subtle details in the music that she had forgotten existed. Her whole body began to move with the rhythm, the way it used to when she was a serious music student. The audience was no longer just politely listening. They were captivated. Sarah could feel their attention like a warm light shining on her. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of that attention. She was using it, feeding off it, letting it inspire her to play even better. As the ballade moved toward its dramatic climax, Sarah played with a passion she hadn't felt in years. The music poured out of her like water bursting from a dam, all the frustration of the past 3 years, all the dreams she had given up, all the nights she had stared at her keyboard and felt too sad to play. It all came out through her fingers and transformed into something beautiful. The final section of the piece was like a musical storm. Complex runs of notes cascaded from the piano like rain, while the main melody sang out above them like a voice calling through the chaos. Sarah's hands moved with precision and power that amazed even her. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ballad came to its gentle conclusion. The storm passed, and the music settled into a few simple, perfect final chords. Sarah played the last note and lifted her hands from the keys. The ballroom was completely silent for what felt like an eternity. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then the entire room exploded into applause that was different from the polite clapping she had received when she walked to the stage. This was enthusiastic, amazed applause. People were not just being polite. They were genuinely moved by what they had heard. Some people stood up and clapped. Then more people stood. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was giving Sarah a standing ovation. Sarah sat on the piano bench feeling stunned. She had done it. She had actually done it. She had played a complete, beautiful piece of music in front of 300 people and they loved it. But more than that, she had remembered something she thought she had lost forever. She had remembered that she was a musician, not just someone who had studied music once, but someone who carried music in her soul. The applause continued for what felt like several minutes. People were smiling at her, nodding their approval, some wiping tears from their eyes. Sarah looked out at the audience and felt something she hadn't experienced in years, pride in her musical abilities. She stood up from the piano bench and took a small bow. The applause grew even louder. As she walked back toward her table, people reached out to touch her arm, to congratulate her, to tell her how beautiful her playing had been. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the applause anymore. She was thinking about the music, about how it had felt to play with passion again, about the part of herself she had just rediscovered. She was also thinking about what would happen next, because she could see that Marcus's face had gone from confusion to something that looked almost like anger. His plan to humiliate her had completely backfired, and Sarah had a feeling this was only the beginning of the evening's surprises. The applause was still ringing in Sarah's ears as she made her way back to her table, but she never made it there. Halfway across the ballroom, a distinguished elderly man in an expensive tuxedo intercepted her path. "Excuse me, Miss Martinez," he said with a warm smile. "That was absolutely extraordinary. I'm Dr. Robert Chen, conductor of the City Symphony Orchestra." Sarah's eyes widened. The City Symphony was one of the most respected orchestras in the country. She had dreamed of playing with them back in college. "I have to ask," Dr. Chen continued, "where have you been hiding? Playing like that doesn't happen overnight. You have the touch of someone who has been seriously trained." Before Sarah could answer, another person appeared at her side, a woman with short silver hair and intelligent eyes. "I'm Margaret Foster from Classical Music Monthly," she said, extending her hand. "I was here covering the charity aspect of tonight's gala, but that performance, that was something special. Would you be interested in doing an interview?" Sarah felt overwhelmed. People were gathering around her, all wanting to talk about her music. She could see phones being pulled out as people recorded videos and took photos. "The way you played that Chopin," said a young man who looked like he might be a music student. "It was like you were telling a story." Each phrase had so much meaning. More people joined the crowd around Sarah. She heard fragments of conversations. Incredible technique. Such emotional depth. Where has she been performing? An elegant woman in a blue gown pushed through the small crowd. "My dear, I'm Helena Rodriguez. I manage several classical artists. That performance suggests you have professional-level abilities. Are you currently represented?" Sarah's head was spinning. All these people thought she was a professional musician. They didn't know she was just an office worker who had barely remembered how to play 2 weeks ago. I'm not performing professionally right now," Sarah managed to say. "Well, that's a tragedy," said Dr. Chen. "Talent like yours should be shared with the world. Have you considered auditioning for our orchestra? We have openings for solo pianists." Suddenly, a flash went off near Sarah's face. She turned to see a photographer from the local newspaper taking pictures. "This is perfect," the photographer said. "The story of hidden talent revealed at a corporate gala. The readers will love this." Sarah noticed that Marcus had appeared at the edge of the crowd. His face was pale and he looked like he was trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said loudly, trying to get everyone's attention, "perhaps we should let Sarah return to her table so we can continue with the evening's program." But nobody was listening to Marcus. Helena Rodriguez was still talking to Sarah about management opportunities. Dr. Chen was asking about her musical background. The journalist was taking notes about her training and current situation. A man Sarah didn't recognize approached with a business card. "I'm James Mitchell from Mitchell Records," he said. "We specialize in classical music recordings. Based on what I heard tonight, I think we should have a conversation about recording possibilities." Sarah took the business card with trembling hands. Mitchell Records was a prestigious label that she had only dreamed about in college. "This is happening too fast," Sarah said quietly to the group. "I need to explain something. I haven't been performing professionally. I work in the office here at Blackstone Industries. Tonight was just..." Just what?" asked Margaret Foster, her pen ready to write. Sarah looked around at all the expectant faces. These people saw her as a serious musician, someone with real talent and potential. For 3 years, she had seen herself as a failed artist who had given up her dreams. But maybe both things could be true. I studied music in college, Sarah said slowly. But I had to stop performing because of family responsibilities. I've been working regular jobs to support my mother and brother. Tonight was the first time I've played in front of an audience in 3 years. The crowd around her grew quiet. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. That explains the rawness in your playing, he said. There was something so honest about it, so emotional. You weren't performing for show. You were playing from your heart. Helena Rodriguez looked impressed. 3 years away from performance and you can still play like that? That suggests natural talent that runs very deep. More people were joining the crowd now. Sarah could see other guests from across the ballroom walking over to see what all the excitement was about. Someone was recording everything on their phone. The mayor appeared next to Sarah. Ms. Martinez, that was a remarkable performance. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in playing at our city's cultural celebration next month. We could offer a substantial fee. Sarah felt dizzy. A few hours ago, she had been terrified of embarrassing herself. Now people were offering her jobs and recording contracts. Marcus pushed through the crowd, clearly frustrated. I think Sarah needs to get back to her table, he said firmly. She has work responsibilities to think about. Dr. Chen turned to Marcus with a surprised expression. Work responsibilities? Are you suggesting that someone with this level of musical talent should be filing papers instead of performing? Sarah is an employee of Blackstone Industries, Marcus said coldly. Her job is administrative work, not music. The crowd around Sarah went quiet. Helena Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. With respect, Mr. Blackstone, she said, talent like this doesn't come along often. It would be a waste for society if Sarah weren't allowed to pursue her musical gifts. Several people nodded in agreement. Sarah could see that the mood had shifted. These successful, influential people were looking at Marcus like he was the one who didn't belong. Margaret Foster stepped forward with her notebook. Mr. Blackstone, can you tell me why you asked Sarah to perform tonight? Did you know about her musical background? Marcus looked trapped. Sarah could see him trying to think of an answer that wouldn't reveal his cruel intentions. We like to showcase employee talents, he said weakly. And did you know she would play at this professional level? Margaret continued. Marcus's face grew red. I expected her to do her best. Dr. Chen looked back and forth between Marcus and Sarah. Sarah, may I ask, was this performance your choice or were you assigned to play tonight? Sarah felt all eyes on her. She could tell the truth and expose Marcus's attempt to humiliate her, or she could protect herself and her job by staying quiet. She thought about her mother in the hospital and Carlos in college. She thought about the health insurance she desperately needed. But she also thought about the music she had just played, about how alive she had felt sitting at that piano. I was asked to perform, Sarah said carefully. Helena Rodriguez seemed to sense there was more to the story. Asked or told? Sarah looked directly at Marcus. His cold blue eyes were warning her to be careful. But then she looked around at all the people who had been moved by her music, who saw value in her talents, who believed she deserved better than filing papers and answering phones. I was told to perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, Sarah said clearly. I told Mr. Blackstone that I wasn't prepared for such a difficult piece, but he insisted. The crowd murmured with interest. Margaret Foster was writing quickly. So you changed the program yourself? Dr. Chen asked. I played what I could play well, Sarah said. I wanted to give the audience something beautiful, rather than disappoint them with something I couldn't handle. Several people smiled and nodded approvingly. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. James Mitchell from the record label stepped forward again. Sarah, regardless of tonight's circumstances, what matters is what we heard. And what we heard was exceptional. I'd like to offer you an audition for a recording contract. As would I like to offer you an audition with the symphony, added Dr. Chender. Sarah looked around at all these opportunities being offered to her. A few hours ago, she had thought her musical career was over forever. Now it seemed like it might just be beginning. But she also knew that Marcus was still her boss and she still needed her job. The reality of her situation hadn't changed just because she had played one good performance. Thank you all so much, Sarah said. This has been the most amazing night of my life. But I need some time to think about everything. Helena Rodriguez handed Sarah a business card. Think quickly, she said with a smile. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. As the crowd began to disperse and people returned to their tables, Sarah was left standing with a handful of business cards and a heart full of possibilities she had never imagined. But when she looked across the ballroom, she saw Marcus watching her with an expression that was no longer just cold. It was furious. And Sarah realized that while her performance had opened doors she thought were closed forever, it had also created a new set of problems she would have to face very soon. Sarah barely slept that night. She lay in her small apartment staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening. On her nightstand were 7 business cards from people who wanted to work with her. 7 opportunities that could change her life completely. But she also couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's angry face and what Monday morning would bring. She didn't have to wait long to find out. At 7 a.m. her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Sarah, I need to see you in my office immediately," he said in a cold voice. "We need to discuss your behavior last night." Sarah's stomach dropped. "It's Saturday morning, Mr. Blackstone. I'm aware of what day it is. Be here in 1 hour." The line went dead. Sarah got dressed quickly and took a taxi to the office building. It felt strange to be there on a Saturday morning when the place was completely empty. Her footsteps echoed in the hallways as she made her way to Marcus's office. Marcus was waiting for her behind his big desk. He didn't ask her to sit down. "That was quite a performance last night, Sarah," he said. But his tone made it clear this wasn't a compliment. Very different from what we discussed. "I played the best I could under the circumstances," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "You deliberately disobeyed my instructions." "I specifically told you to play Rachmaninoff." Sarah felt a spark of anger. "You know I couldn't play Rachmaninoff. You knew that when you demanded it. You set me up to fail." Marcus's eyes grew cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. I simply wanted to showcase your musical education. But instead you chose to make a scene and embarrass the company." Embarrass the company? Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Everyone loved the performance. People were impressed with Blackstone Industries for having such talented employees. That's not the point. The point is that you can't follow simple instructions. And employees who can't follow instructions don't belong at this company. Sarah felt her heart racing. "Are you firing me?" Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm giving you a choice, Sarah. You can apologize for your unprofessional behavior last night, promise to follow orders in the future, and continue working here as my administrative assistant. Or you can clean out your desk and leave." Sarah stared at him. After everything that had happened last night, after all the people who had seen her talent and offered her opportunities, Marcus still wanted to treat her like she was worthless. "You want me to apologize for playing well?" she asked. "I want you to apologize for disobeying direct orders from your supervisor." Sarah thought about her mother in the hospital and Carlos in college. She thought about the health insurance and the steady paycheck. For 3 years, those thoughts had been enough to keep her quiet and obedient. But then she thought about how it had felt to play piano again. She thought about the standing ovation and Dr. Chen's offer to audition for the symphony. She thought about Helena Rodriguez saying her talent shouldn't be wasted filing papers. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She scrolled to her photos from last night and found a video that someone had posted on social media. It showed her playing the Chopin piece, and it already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. She turned the phone so Marcus could see it. "This video has been shared over 1,000 times since last night," she said. "People are calling it the hidden talent revealed, and the most beautiful surprise performance ever." The comments are full of people praising Blackstone Industries for supporting artistic employees. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Social media doesn't matter. It does when the mayor's office called me this morning asking if I'd consider playing at the city's cultural festival. It does when the local news station wants to do a feature story about discovering talent in unexpected places." Sarah saw Marcus's expression change slightly. Bad publicity was something he understood and feared. "The story they want to tell," Sarah continued, "is about a company that recognizes and celebrates the diverse talents of its employees. But if I suddenly disappear from Blackstone Industries right after my performance, the story becomes about a company that punishes employees for being too talented." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could see him calculating the potential damage to his reputation and the company's image. "What do you want, Sarah?" he finally asked. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine the rest of her life. "I want to give you my resignation," she said clearly. Marcus looked surprised. "Your resignation?" Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a typed letter. She had written it at 5 a.m. after lying awake all night thinking about her choices. "I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice," she said, placing the letter on his desk. "I'll finish any urgent projects and help train my replacement. But after that, I'm leaving to pursue music professionally." Marcus read the letter quickly, his face growing redder with each line. "You're making a huge mistake, Sarah. Music is not a reliable career. You have a steady job here with good benefits. You're throwing away security for a fantasy." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But last night I remembered something I had forgotten. I remembered that I'm a musician. Not just someone who used to study music, but someone who has music in their soul, and I can't pretend to be anything else anymore." She pulled out the business cards from the night before and showed them to Marcus. "Helena Rodriguez from Elite Artist Management wants to represent me. Dr. Chen from the City Symphony offered me an audition. James Mitchell from Mitchell Records wants to discuss a recording contract. The mayor wants me to perform at city events." Marcus stared at the cards. "Those people were just being polite. Then I guess I'll find out. But I'd rather try and fail at something I love than spend the rest of my life succeeding at something that makes me miserable." Sarah stood up to leave, but Marcus called after her. "You know you're not the only one with financial responsibilities, Sarah. Other people depend on steady jobs. If you leave, I'll have to find someone to replace you, and that's not easy." Sarah turned back to him. "You're right. Other people do need steady jobs. That's why you should treat your employees with respect instead of trying to humiliate them at company parties." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Blackstone? If anyone asks me about last night, I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to tell them that you tried to set me up to fail. But that failure taught me I was stronger than I thought. I'm going to tell them that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can turn out to be the best thing." Sarah left Marcus's office and walked through the empty building toward the elevators. With each step, she felt lighter. By the time she reached the street, she was smiling. Her phone was buzzing with text messages. Carlos had sent her the link to the video, along with, "Sarah, you're famous!" Mom cried happy tears watching this. There were messages from several of the people she had met last night, following up on their offers. Helena Rodriguez had sent a detailed email about representation possibilities. Dr. Chen had included information about symphony auditions. But the message that made Sarah stop walking and stare at her phone was from her mother. "Mija, I saw the video online. You played like an angel. I knew this day would come. I knew you would find your way back to music. I'm so proud of you. Don't worry about the medical bills. Worry about following your dreams. Love, Mama." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks as she stood on the sidewalk. Her mother, even while sick and struggling, was telling her to choose dreams over security. That afternoon, Sarah called Helena Rodriguez and scheduled a meeting. She called Dr. Chen and asked about audition requirements. She called the mayor's office and said she would be honored to perform at the cultural festival. Over the next 2 weeks, as Sarah finished her final projects at Blackstone Industries, her life began to transform. The video of her performance went viral, being shared on social media platforms around the world. News stations in other cities picked up the story. Classical music blogs wrote articles about her, but more importantly, Sarah started practicing piano seriously again. She rented time at a music studio with a good grand piano. She began working with Helena Rodriguez to plan auditions and performances. She discovered that her musical abilities, far from being rusty, had actually deepened during her years away from performance. On her last day at Blackstone Industries, Sarah cleaned out her desk while her coworkers watched sadly. Many of them had become friends over the past 2 years. "We're going to miss you," Janet said, hugging Sarah goodbye. "But I'm so excited for your new career. You deserve to be doing what you love." As Sarah packed her personal items, she found the old family photos she had kept on her desk. She looked at the faces of her mother, Carlos, and herself, all smiling and hopeful. She picked up her phone and called Carlos. "How's Mom doing today?" she asked. "Better. The new treatment is working really well. And Sarah, I got some news today. I received a full scholarship for my last 2 years of college. The music department heard about your story and wanted to help our family." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Carlos, I have news too. Mitchell Records offered me a recording contract. And the City Symphony wants me to be their featured soloist for their spring concert series. We're going to be okay. Better than okay.